Hey everybody, I'm Pooch Van Druten, and that is...
This is Chris Rabold in yet another hotel room. Welcome to my hotel.
Chris Rabold from undisclosed location.
That's it.
Coming to us live. You're my travel partner. I stay at home by myself. And you go out into the world to see
me and my mask. That's gallivanting right. About.
You're my Galileo. You're like, yes. You're going out to see what the world is going on and come back and tell us how it is.
Yeah.
But yeah, man, episode 45.
Okay, we made it. Good. I didn't know where we were. 45.
45. Cool. We made it to 45.
Cool.
And thank you guys for sticking with us. And we appreciate you, coming back and checking things out. We know that some of you, watch every single episode and are, anticipating our episode every week. And we've been, releasing about every other week or so. And so we appreciate you hanging with us and coming in and checking it out.
Definitely.
We will try to release when we can. It may not be every week, but we are going to release these when we can and keep doing them because we like it.
Yeah, I didn't really know if we were going to get one in this week, and I happen to be off, and this is my first day off since I've left home, so this worked out great.
Yeah.
We get it when we can. Get
it while you can. Exactly. Yep. I thought today, I was thinking about this a lot, and, our world, at least for now, live people have kind of shifted to broadcast land. I know that you've done a bunch of gigs where you've been a broadcast mixer. And I know that's happening a lot, especially in the live or in the church world. Live guys are getting pushed into the broadcast part of this. But what I also thought about with the advent of kind of immersive audio and also 5.1 mixing, that we haven't really talked about any of that stuff. What happens when your left and right gets taken away from you?
Right.
And all of a sudden you're mixing in 5.1. Or in immersive audio, there's every major speaker company in the world is coming up with ideas to have immersive audio. So I don't think it's going away. I think it's going to be here for a while. But specifically, let's talk to maybe some guys that are doing broadcast at the moment and have maybe run into situations where they're having to mix in 5.1 and what that means and how you do it. And I know that you recently were doing some studio projects and also some other mixing stuff that was in 5.1. So maybe kick us off. Like, what are the pitfalls? What do we have to watch out for? And how is it different?
Right. Yeah. It's a heavy bag to try to wrap your head around. And let me, as a disclaimer, say that the way that it's impacting me currently is that I am providing deliverables to entities that handle the 5.1 mixdown. So in other words, it's on me and my team to hand stems that can be appropriately assigned. So whereas I'm not set up to mix in 5.1. In this current project here, I'm out in LA. The studio, it just doesn't do that. It's a recording studio. It just only does what it does. But the stuff we're working on needs to be 5.1 compatible. So what that means is, basically your left and right, your stereo mix becomes stems. And to some people, that's no big deal. It's a simple unraveling. And it's not a big deal. Now, when I say what that is, at its most basic, what the major networks really want at their most basic is drums left, right, instruments left, right, BGVs left, right, and then the vocals, and then the lead vocals. And then they take those and they assign them. And this is where I'm going to be careful where not to tread, because I don't, even though I've sat there and witnessed it, I don't fully understand. It's what gets spread around. It's what goes in the center channel. It's what doesn't go in the center channel. But it's not the same. Taking those stems clearly allows them to have greater flexibility of what to do. When they take just a simple 2 mix their hands are tied and they're faking it everywhere, and it just doesn't work. So, in a nutshell, that's how it's in my world now. And now it does parallel, though, to the immersive world that some people are either going to choose to be in, or it's going to be chosen for them that they're in, where they're pulling their mix apart, right? Yeah. Is that a kind of okay primer to get us started?
Yeah, absolutely. Here? That's it. Let's talk about we're talking about two different things also. You're talking about taking a 2 mix that you're mixing and then delivering the stems to make it 5.1, someone else taking that and deciding where that's happening in 5.1. That's different from mixing in 5.1.
Correct.
And I think it's harder to do it the way that you're doing it.
It is because, and it involves a good deal of trust.
Yes.
You know, and fortunately, everyone that I'm working with on this, I do trust wholeheartedly, you know. Good. But you are, you know, it's the same thing as, guys, if you've ever gone anywhere and if you've ever broken your mix out into stems and you've had to take it somewhere, and this is typically a TV thing, and it's like, put them all at unity to whoever the receiving mixer is. Even if you're with them, just put them at unity, that's the mix. And before you know it, one of those stems is down to or up to. It's like, no. I promise you, unity is where it's at. So yeah, it's and not just for the mixer, but for the artist too. If the artist is involved or has entrusted, clearly they've entrusted in you. That's why you have the gig to deliver something. But the something is not. That's the beauty of a 2 mix. Here it is. You can't. That's it. There's nothing they can do to it. When you start breaking it apart, it allows them. But you also have to have a little bit of trust in that, okay, if they're like the BGVs, for example, okay, they're going to spread them and put some specific effects on them to spread them. I trust them to do that and maintain the integrity of the mix. But it's still, it's a roll of the dice in doing it. You know?
Yeah. So maybe we should, if you're not familiar with mixing in 5.1 or haven't really heard it, you know, a lot of people don't have that in their homes, or most people, I would say. But let's just describe what your basic 5.1 mix is and what being broadcast to the world as far as TV goes and TV music goes. Is, you know, 5.1 stands for 5 speakers. So there's a left, right, and a center, and then 2 backs and a sub. That makes up 5.1. Okay. And what's weird about that compared to what we normally do is that the center channel for TV and also for audio, you know, when we're talking about award shows or whatever, the center channel becomes the dialogue channel, basically, right? And in regards to music, there's 2 different kind of schools of thought where they spread the center into the left and right with the vocal, for instance, or you keep the vocal in that dialogue center channel, and then the effects of the vocal are spread into the left and the right. And so the reason that I said it's hard to do it the way that Chris is doing it is because if you're mixing in 5.1, you can make those decisions. You can say, hey, I want the vocal in the center channel, and then I'm going to spread the effects out into the left and the right, thereby creating an image. And so if you were to listen to the left and right by itself, it would be music and then some reverb and chorus of the vocal, let's say. You know what I mean? And that's hard to do with the direction that you're going, which is stereo mix and then create stems of that. So if you can do it that way, the down convert from 5.1 to a 2 mix is a better result, I think, than the way that you're going, because there's decisions that you have to make that, you know, forces the 5.1 guy to do whatever, keep things far left and right, you know? So I just wanted to point out that there are some decisions like that that you can make. And traditionally in 5.1 music mixing, award shows, etc., the backs are pretty rarely used. You might spread your reverbs and your effects out a little bit so that they're kind of out here, but really like they'll use the backs for like audience noise a lot.
Right.
But not like if you could isolate the backs, you would hear audience and reverbs and just a little bit of maybe the left and the right, but not a whole lot. Yeah. Just to smear the whole thing so that it's bigger, you know? Mm-hmm. And so that's 5.1 traditionally, but it's like, I don't know, there's going to be with immersive audio now and with, people talking about doing immersive audio live with big speaker stacks. I think there's going to be some change to the traditional part of that maybe. So in your experience, you're delivering a 2-mix to somebody, and tell us what some of those decisions were of those stems.
Yeah. Well, the interesting thing to backtrack, just to touch on what you were saying, is that, and it really is no difference there is no difference when it comes to immersive live, in that there is a lot of reinventing of the wheel or unraveling of a mix or an approach to a mix that is done for sparsely used elements.
Yes.
And so that's the interesting thing, is like, at what point now in TV, for example, what this is for, that ship has set sail long ago. This is what they do. That's, you know what I mean? Yeah. In the live world is where now suddenly it's been thrust upon us, where, and it's changing mixing approaches left and right. And it's like, I'm doing all of this so that I can put a reverb right back there. You know what I mean? So it is totally changing like how your thought process in your mix is. The quick version of that, and I'll let you get back into it because I know where you're headed. Is we build all these things and we talk about having summing into summing into summing and building all of these blocks that are all doing minimal compression so that we end up overall with this really nice squashed, mastered left and right thing. Well, now all bets are off. You're taking all that shit away from me, and it's a different thing. Yeah.
So keep going.
And that's true. And I'll tell you, I mean, I've struggled with this, and I feel like we've addressed this when we've talked about immersive on here before. I struggle with that, with the directive of immersive, in that it's just, and I see it, I get it. It's where I'm not saying everything's headed that way, because it's not practical, as we've talked about on a touring level, for it to have 900 hangs of PA, but it's going to be more and more. It's something we have to contend with. And it's just changing my whole approach, not mine, everyone's, to how we do things, particularly as you mentioned, when you said the mastered word, it's changing your approach. Man, it's hard enough to make a 2-mix work too. You know what I mean?
2 speakers are hard enough.
Yeah. Let alone when we pull it apart and it's just different. The imaging is just different. Like the spectrum is still from here to here, plus here to here, but it doesn't sound the same. So really the hardest thing is how it pertains to what your version of bus compression, in-stage bus compression. That's right. That's the biggest and the hardest thing to deal with, or quite honestly to accept, if I'm honest.
And I think what's hard about it too is that you and I, what's particularly difficult is if you build a stereo mix, kind of what you're doing in the studio. You build a stereo mix. You're like, yeah, this is all, happening. This is great. And then you take me to somewhere and say, okay, now break it out into,
pull it apart.
Yeah. Pull it apart.
Yeah.
If you are starting that way, if you're building from the beginning, then okay, there's going to be a bunch of different things that you're going to do, right? In your compression. Now it's no longer thinking about, hey, this is summing and bunch of compression. So now that the drums have been through 3 washes of 3 dB compression, the output in a stereo is this. Now it's going to be, well, I'm going to squash it right in the front part of that.
Right.
Because these 2 outputs are going to everything. So it's like it's a different thought process, and I think it's simpler if you're building from the beginning. If you're trying to pull your already killer mix apart, I don't think it's going to work. I think that you have to, you know what I mean?
It's a compromise. And like, there might be someone listening here that mixes for like some mega church that has that they have a broad, they're not just like streaming now. They have a full broadcast.
I think there's a lot of them that do that, actually.
There are. And I've been at, where did I go that was just unbelievably impressive? The Church of Jesus Christ of Latter-day Saint, the Mormon thing. That's one of the most impressive facilities I've ever been in my life. And they've got, I want to say multiple 5.1. I don't quote me on that, but it's they've got a lot. And some people listening may be like, yeah, I do this every week. And you're right. If you're building from scratch,
yes,
you know, but we're not. We're taking mixes that have only for a brief time existed in their stereo sense, and now we're undoing them. And I'll tell you what you got to start thinking about is, in this sense, you know, what are stems? And like, in other words, what does that mean to you? And if this isn't a mix that has existed in a stereo form, and if you have to print stems, so this is all for me, this is TV stuff, right? Yeah. So it's not live. We're going to print it, send it. They're going to do their deal with what we send them. So what are your stems? Are your stems processed? If they're processed, how are they processed? Are you just running them back through that, whatever your stereo bus chain was? And if you're just running them by themselves, they're now not moving. You see, you know what I'm saying?
That doesn't work. Yeah.
That doesn't work. So you have, and there's a trick. We'll give you, Pooch and I just offline, we're talking about this, and we'll talk about kind of a workaround that works for that. Or are you saying, forget it, that's not what this is anymore? And that's the hard pill to swallow, because now mind you, both yours and my, and this is the fortunate thing, it's not like on the stereo bus there's some compressor doing 12 dB of
exactly.
It's so crazy in that it's just kissing those elements, but it's critically vital.
Yeah.
You know?
And if that bus isn't seeing all those things, the threshold of that and all of the settings that you've made for that stereo compressor are based upon all of those things coming out of that bus.
We're working in conjunction.
Yes. And so as soon as you start taking those things and putting them somewhere else, now that compressor that's sitting there on your...
It's not doing anything.
It's not doing anything.
Without the vocal and without the drums, it's probably not doing anything.
That's right.
You know? Now, will it work? 100%. Absolutely. Like, your mix will work. It'll still sound like music, but it won't... I don't know. And
I describe it as disjointed.
It is disjointed.
I feel like sometimes if you have to pull apart your mix like that, then all of a sudden the whatever frequencies that you were working on with the keyboards, let's say, or the guitars or whatever, when you pull them out of that and then spread them apart and put them somewhere else in now this huge stereo spectrum, because I still think in stereo, even though I'm sitting in front of a 5.1, I'm still thinking stereo. I'm just thinking now with 5.1, it's wider and deeper that I can go, right?
Right.
But as soon as you start taking those things and moving them farther away or whatever, all of the frequency masking sharing that you had going on in your stereo bus is now broken apart and different. And so now things sound all weird and disjointed, right?
Yeah. You know, like super wide, almost not super wide. That's a literally like the arms, the reach of your mix, the length of it. Of course they sound wider because it's spread, but it's, what you said, you nailed it with the frequency masking. Yeah. That's a huge part of it, which is also like a beautiful part of surround, or immersive or whatever you want to call it, is you can give things now their very much unique space that you never had before. But there is none of us that have come up mixing in surround. The kid today, which, man, kids today have it made. You get a computer, you got GarageBand, you're a mixer.
Totally.
They're mixing in left-right stereo. So unless you're a practitioner of this, it's just gonna be weird. It's gonna be hard, and I don't know, for guys that have to deal with tracks too, kind of tangent here. If you're a mixer that deals with tracks, with a live band, or if you're just a track act or something, I mean, we've all gotten, hey, send me the stems, can look a million different ways. Totally. The guys, they can all be at 0 dB full scale, where they've like over mastered the stems to where they don't sum. They sum destructively and will clip. That's or you get it to where it's the worst version of what we're talking about, because they didn't all go together through a stereo processing, which was very heavy-handed. Maybe now they're just weak and anemic and they don't make sense. And because remember, like those, again, if you've got a bus compressor, well, real quick, something you said, aside from like frequency masking being lessened and some things, there's also, we've harped quite often about the tonal component of bus processing and compression as it pertains to like attack and release times. When you're allowing those transients to pass ever so slightly, it's not just the transient, there's that fast acting transient, brighter tone, like there's all these, tonally it fucks with your mix in a good way. You take it away, you lose all that. So, it's just, anyway, it depends. You're right. If you're starting from scratch, though, if you're mixing into this, then you're ready. If you're handing it over, I mean, I'm fortunate in that I'm handing it over to the best in the business. Like, sure. So it's going to be fine, So
tell us what, because I don't know. I've been racking my brain the whole time while you've been talking and going, I don't think I've ever gone the way that you have. I've always started mixing in 5.1 and then worried about what the down convert was, because that's also an issue, right? Like you mix these things, you spread all these things out, you place the vocal in the center channel only. And then when you do a down convert of that and squish all that stuff together, the frequency masking of that gets wanky too.
Then so it gets weird.
It's just as hard to go that way. But I'm curious, like, what were the stems that you made from that stereo thing? What are you giving that guy?
Yeah, and this is what I do. And I want to be very, very clear on this. I am not, by any stretch of the imagination, a seasoned 5.1 mixer.
Neither am I.
But I am used to being in this situation.
Yeah.
So I wish I could speak as deeply as you and I can speak on just mixing, whether it's studio or whatever, or live sound. With this, I'm on the peripheral, but I know what to do. So what I do, typically, if I know this is going to become if this is a thing, is I reach out to the mixer and I say, hey, how do I accommodate you?
Yeah. What do you want?
What do you need? Yeah. And some of them will ask for things like kick. Here's one: kick and bass to be taken out, like the kick to be taken out of the drum sub, so that maybe the kick goes in the center channel,
right?
Or the bass, or they'll ask for certain elements to be pulled apart. I can tell you at its most basic, what they're going to want, just like what's the most basic thing you could possibly give them, it's going to look something like, I think I mentioned it, we've already said it on here, but it's going to be something like drums left, right.
Yep.
And it's going to be music left, right, instruments left, right, BGV and vocals. That's at its most basic. But what I do is I contact the mixer and I'm just like, hey, how do you do it? Because like you said, and you nailed it, and I think, I don't want to say it, but I think I know exactly what they do on this one particular thing we're working on. The vocal's a big one.
Yeah.
Do you put the vocal in the center, or do you, and there is very little, there's no gray area. Guys are like, absolutely not, or yes. I find more times than not, it's absolutely not. They put it, you know what I mean? They don't.
Yep.
They
but what gets weird about that, and I know I've watched TV mixers a lot, they will, that gets weird when it's not an award show where there's, song after song after song and then commercial break and then you come to the announce or whatever. That's different. Then they're like, I want to put the vocals need to be out here. But if you're doing like a TV show where it's going back and forth between dialogue and that, it gets a little weird to put the vocals out here when the dialogue is coming from here all the time.
Yes.
And so I've watched them sometimes like make a decision to do that,
Yeah.
And the other thing is I think that most 5.1 mixers, and like I said, dude, listen, I'm not, I mixed an album in 5.1. That's all I know.
Right.
And it was a live record for Linkin Park, this thing called, we played at Milton Keynes and I mixed the record, but I mixed it in 5.1. And so I got to start with 5.1 and then do a down convert that became the record. So I'm no expert, but having watched some guys over the years, I think that they take into account a lot of home 5.1 systems.
This is exactly what I'm thinking.
Is a piece of shit.
That's the entire. Go ahead. Sorry.
Yeah. So the center channel is like the worst speaker of the four.
Mm-hmm.
And so they know that. And so they don't take, they'll put dialogue there because the frequency range of the human voice when it's speaking is not like when it's singing. And so I think that most people do what you're saying. Spread the word.
This whole conversation, and I have a question about the record you did, but this whole conversation, all I'm thinking of is my dad's poorly put together, all-in-one boxed Sony surround sound thing he bought at Walmart. You know what I'm saying?
That is the norm that's out there for 5.1.
And that's the truth. That's the truth. And that's the scary part. But you're right. I mean, the mixers know that too. But I'm just thinking about sitting in his den with the surround speaker sitting right here. It's just reverb and applause, or birds in a golf tournament or something. A center channel that's wrong, and I've tried to fix it for him, and the left and right that are here, and it's so rare. Like the notion of a true surround listening room is for the uber wealthy. It's just not that common. That's the big rub on all of this. Is like, who are we doing this for? But
I know, we're doing it for the 1%.
Right. And now the deal that the TV guys also have to contend with, which I don't want to say bless their hearts, but like, goddamn, good luck, is when it is a big award show and that is pre-taped. Yeah. And they don't want to do it, but certain artists have the ability to mix after the fact to deliver to them the whole continuity of their show. And that's where, we talk about politically the way to deal with things. This is where you really have to understand, like, for me, do I want the mix unraveled and have to undo all this? Of course I don't. Only because I was really happy with what we had. But I understand what they're trying to do. And also I understand they have to maintain continuity throughout their show. Yeah. So that the stuff that was mixed from them from the jump now marries with this stuff that we are delivering and maybe a handful of other people are doing as well. So they really have it's a big task to make it all work, to make it all to marry. And again, on our end, it's just a leap of faith that it's all going to work. I can tell you that what I think, I'm not done. I mean, that's why I'm in this hotel room, is we're still working on this. Yeah. We will have, we're getting ready to go in and we've mixed these songs already. Now we're going to have to go in and stem it out. Yeah. And we've already had discussions, but now we need to really have the discussion. Like, what do you want? What is this?
I'm curious, when you go that direction, are you listening to your stems and then summing those stems? You know what I mean?
That's a great question. Well, it was just decided before I jumped on a couple hours ago. I was talking with my partner, I have another partner in this world other than you. And
are you cheating on me, Chris?
I am. His name is Charles, and he's lovely. What we've decided to do, because this is the move. Okay, this is great, and I feel like this is all okay to talk about. It was a few hours ago. We went down the route of do we mix in 5.1? And I'm like, no, we don't, because that's not what we do.
Yeah.
Do we? What preceded that was, damn it, I need to know more about this. Do we work on our skill set and somehow try to get better at this on our own? Yes. Do we start this week? No, we do not.
No.
What we do is we'll have the conversation. What do you guys want? Now, I'll tell you, of course, I'm talking in circles and knots. I don't know why everyone knows who I work with, but for this particular project, I have a very particular artist that I work with. Their brain is in stereo. Like they want great. Music.
Yeah, right.
They just want music.
Yeah.
And music is typically just stereo, left and right. Like this kind of bugs them, and that's what people need to realize too. Hear me, immersive crowd, hear me, they just want music. They're like, what are we doing this for? So, anyway, the deal is it's a big show. They know what they're doing. We're going to break it out. We're going to break it out exactly how they want it, assuming we get approval to do this, from said artists. And we're going to send it to them and then ask for a return
of a stereo summed version of it. Interesting.
Meaning, hey, you guys we know you got it in surround. If we can cobble together a surround system, we'll listen. But what we really need to feel okay about is the stereo return of this.
Interesting.
Because even at the end of the day, again, the percentages of who's hearing this in surround are just very, very small.
Yeah.
And it's kind of similar to the thought process as everyone is, getting into immersive and stuff. Think about where your listeners are. Like the ones that are getting the immersive experience are not the majority.
Yeah.
They're the ones right in the center. So there's a little bit of, I can't help but think about all of this as it pertains to immersive because it's a lot of the same thing. So, but anyway, to answer your question, that's what we're going to do is we're going to be like, we want to get it done as quick as we can, send it to them, just send us back the stereo because that's all we really care about. We know you got it in surround. And that's the best we can do because we're not the people we could go do it with them and they would accommodate us to do that, but we've got other stuff going on and it's just not feasible.
Totally get it. Yeah.
So,
I mean, and there's guys that know what to do. There's 5.1 mixers that know way more about it than I do,
Yeah. And they do. And in this case, like no one's going to try to, everybody's just trying to do their best job.
No, that's right.
And whereas I don't work for them and my concerns are for my client, their concerns are for the show and they know who my client is and they want we're all going to see each other again. And it's just got to work, it's just got to work. And I
think, at least in my experience, when I mixed a 5.1 record, I mixed it in 5.1. Okay.
Yeah. Tell me about that. And then how did that play?
So get this, because I was mixing in 5.1 because it was a video release that was then also released as a record. And so I was actually going back and forth between 5.1 and stereo. And even though I mixed it in 5.1, the stems that I sent were not, 5 stems and a single. That wasn't like I didn't make the final decision. There was a guy after me, a video 5.1 mixer guy that I sent my stems to. But it wasn't quite like you because I was mixing in 5.1. So I was making decisions about spreading some things out. So when you listen to some of my stems, you would hear a guitar that is spread out between 3 stereo stems, if you know what I mean. It's not just the music, it's the left and the right, it's the side and the rear stem. Whatever the guy wanted. And honestly, I can't remember. I did this shit, I don't know, 8 years ago. But it was whatever that guy wanted. Same thing as you. It's like, I'm talking to the dude on the phone and he's like, no, I need you. I know you're mixing in 5.1, but I need you to stem it out like this.
Yeah.
Giving them audience by themselves so that he could make the decision of where to splay audience into the 5.1. Even though I was making decisions like that and providing stems that had audience mostly in the back, but also smeared in the front, he was then taking my stems and kind of remixing what I'd done.
Got it.
And also asked me for individual things so that he could do additional placement after me. Because what gets weirder is nowadays there's a whole upper echelon of the 1% of 5.1 users. Now there's 7.1.
There's 7. Yeah. There's not just 5.1.
Yeah.
Exactly.
And so, and Dolby Atmos and all these kind of weird formats that he needed so that he could, when he was checking all of those formats, he could do individual things and place them where he needed to be. So in reality, even though I was mixing in 5.1 and sending him stems that were supposedly the full 5.1 mix, he was still taking things and making decisions after me.
Right. But fortunately, what's great in that regard is obviously you guys are in communication.
Yeah.
At least he wasn't. Where these guys really get screwed is when they only have the stereo. They can't do anything if they only have a stereo.
Only have left and right. Yeah.
And that's all. And that's the TV people's thing too, is like, guys, look, it's going to screw you and us.
That's right.
If it's only, and that's where, if you do work with a very discerning artist, you got to be like, well, first of all, artist, you don't have to do anything. You know what I'm saying? Like,
I am going to spend 3 days.
Right. You don't have to do a thing.
Yes.
Nor do you even have to approve this, but it really is in your best interest to allow us to do this and to do it as, again, what do you want, mixer dude downstream of me? How do you, so when you did that record though, you were, say again, and we need to talk about bus processing and kind of how we can handle that in this situation. But I guess in that scenario, you didn't have your trusty left, right stereo.
I did though, because most of mixing that, I was mixing in left and right.
Got it.
Every once in a while we would check the 5.1. So we'd be mixing. It was me and my partner, Dylan Eli. He was like the playback guy. And
oh, cool.
So he and I would be mixing in, mixing in left and right. And then, every once in a while, I'll hit the button on the console to make it go 5.1 and be like, oh, okay, yeah, it still works like that. It's okay. And what we were listening to was the stems, the return of the stems that we were sending of 5.1. So we're sending it left and right, mixing the record is what we were doing. At the same time, sending those stems and being able to list A/B between them.
Got you.
And it worked out, and I think I'm proud of the record. I think it's great. I have a 5.1 system. That's a good one. And I've listened to it after I did it, and it's different than what I sent them. You know what I mean?
Yeah.
Like I've checked it out but it's not bad different. It's just different. So even a guy that mixed 5.1 and then handed it to somebody else who then did whatever they do with it, it's still different. It's not exactly what I sent to them.
Right.
But so the answer is yes, I was still doing left and right bus compression like I would be mixing a record. And that is what you hear as that record that got released. But the other stuff, I started from scratch too, right? So, like mixing the other 5.1 stuff wasn't hard for me because I was doing some bus compression in addition to what I was having happen with the left and right.
Yeah. Well, you know what this speaks to as well is something that we harped on in this since we started doing this show, is, you know, the pre-bake is everything en route to that final bus, so that while the bus and what happens on there, for mixers like you and I, some people, again, do absolutely nothing on their stereo bus and it sounds amazing. But while for us, it might actually be minimal yet critical, your mix doesn't fall apart if you have to lose it. And that speaks to really having your shit together in stages, you know, where I can still hand over instruments left, right, and it still sounds, you know, it still sounds good.
Yeah.
So to speak.
I urge people, if you are getting pushed into immersive audio or into 5.1, if you're getting pushed in that direction, I would encourage you to, you know, have a 5.1 system in your house and be able and spend some time, just like you would listening to how others make records, spend some time listening to how others mix 5.1. Like I have on purpose muted, you know, all of the speakers except for the backs to hear what's going on, or all of the speakers except for the center to hear what's going on in various situations, like, you know, for the Grammys or for the, you know, and as a way of ear training and learning what people are doing in 5.1 and what it is that they're putting in each of those speakers.
And that's what I wish I had more. In fact, I said that to the person overseeing this, for who we're handing this off to. I mentioned that to them earlier this week. I said, you know, I need to put my hands in my eye. Intellectually, I understand what's happening.
Yeah, of course.
I need more, but it's hard to just be like, I'm going to go mix 5.1 today. It's like, that's tough. It's not, it's way easier to turn on GarageBand and start mixing, you know?
Yeah.
But, yeah, you're right. If you can get your eyes and ears on it, do it. I wish I could. And I could. I'm sure ultimately with a few phone calls, I could find my way into that situation. But
I think it's the reason that I say that is maybe not even for TV, but as we get into this world of immersive live audio, which is coming, I think if you had a better understanding of what is happening in true 5.1 that these television guys have been mixing for years now, I think it might give you a better idea of what immersive audio live should be. Don't you think?
I totally do. And in fact, even when I've been asked to explain what is immersive audio to anyone other than an audio engineer, I just go, it's like surround sound.
Yeah,
you know,
exactly. Yeah.
It just don't go any further. That's all they need to know. You know what I mean?
Totally.
And it is. And it's just a brave new world.
It is a brave new world. And, you know, I mean, I don't think it's something to be ignored.
Well, you would be, I mean, I have my feelings on it and they are what they are. I also know it's a reality. And for me to be like, yes, it's great, but not for all situations, that's wonderful. But then I better know how to do it. Because it's going to end up in my lap at some point. In fact, it already did. In fact, here's a story. I'm looking at the time. We still have plenty of time. But a couple years ago, I was supposed to go in, and I don't know if I've ever mentioned what the gig was on here, but I was going to go in, and I was going to do, it's now been a couple years, so I don't mind mentioning the client. I was going to go do Britney Spears in Vegas. I was going to do her residency. And it was mandated to me that I do it in immersive. And at first I was like, you know, hey, I didn't choose this. I'm not happy about this. So and I think I've said this on the show. So I got out all my grievances early on. And then I said, okay, but we're doing it. So now let's do it.
We're doing it. So let's do it.
So the biggest thing for me was, again, because I believe so strongly in my process that I'm like, well, damn it, I've just lost all my bus processing. That's no small part of what I do. And I got hired for this gig based on what I do, and now I can't do it.
Right.
And this is what, you and I were talking about off air. This is here's a pro tip for you guys. This is not easy in immersive because if you were to try to think of it in stems, you'd end up with 80 billion channels of trying to do this. But if you're doing it, so for what we're trying to do, where we're just delivering stems for this TV thing, we're going to keep it all in the box. And now is an okay time to throw out this little pro tip, right?
Yeah,
don't you think? The thing about the bus?
Yeah.
It works way better in just like making stems than it does in immersive, to where you're just going to run out of DSP at a certain point. But if you're really committed to your bus, right? You love what you've done with your bus processing. What we're going to do is you essentially copy and paste the same stereo bus plugin. Processing. Sorry, I don't know where my brain was. I stared at the wall of this hotel and got lost for a second.
Where'd you go, Chris? Come back.
Yeah. So anyway, put the same plugins on all your buses, on all your stems. So instead of
all the stems will have the same processing that a stereo bus.
Yes. Or you could do it where you keep the stereo, but somewhere you need to have a compressor. Here's the deal. Make a bus, and I'm going to call it a phantom bus. And it's as if all of your music, all of your sounds were going through a regular left-right. And that bus then is what you want the compressor to react off of, as though you were normally mixing through that bus. One way to do this is to bus your stem. So let's break it down to the basics. Drums left-right, music left-right, or instruments left-right. BGVs, leads. You want those compressors that are identical to your stereo bus to now sidechain off of this phantom bus, so that now your instruments that before on their own would never have triggered any sort of bus compression now will, because the sidechain is looking at a normal everyday stereo bus.
Yeah.
And you could do that to where you, like I'm talking as if we're doing it in groups for the stems, or you could just do it on the stereo bus and have it triggering off of this other bus that is still active, but not active in your, but if that makes any sense at all. But the thing is, that's one way to do it to maintain movement in your processing. So there's your pro tip for the day. Again, it's easy if you're only asking the DSP of a server or a computer or whatever to do this 8 times.
Yeah, so that's
32.
the big. Yeah, I mean that's the big thing. Is okay. So say I have a TG, mastering bus on my mix bus plus the 2500 and maybe a C6. Like that's my mix bus normally. Mm-hmm. Now I have to have that on 16 outputs. You know what I mean? In
you're
stereo.
saying like if you're doing like immersive, or if you were to stem out a TV mix that deep.
Exactly. Now you're talking about eating up a bunch of DSP to just make all that happen. And the other thing I really want to point out with this is that Chris and I have always said this, by the time we get to the mix bus, most of the time that we're doing processing there, it's just tickling things. Yeah. Right. If you try to do this, what we're talking about, taking that mix bus and you're doing 6 dB of squashing, if you try to do that now across all of these stems that you've broken out, if you listen to your vocal by itself, it's going to have snare drum 6 dB dips in the snare drum that are going to make it sound weird.
It's going to be crazy.
I think that this is only going to work if you're that guy. If you're like Chris and I, where you're like, I just tickle the end just a little bit to master it. I think if you're doing any sort of major bus compression at the end, that this isn't going to work. But
it'll sound crazy, particularly if they, like we were saying, particularly if the elements get moved around. Yes, as they're delivered, it won't. So it really,
but it's a great idea, right? Because it keeps that last master bus compression movement that happens where all the things are together are now doing that on every single stem that you're sending.
Yeah.
And when you listen to that sum together, it should result in the same kind of compression.
Right. It should. And I've done mock-ups of this in the box, and it does, it works. But it has, again, that's only when, if that's really, it works for sure if it all comes back at Unity. Once you start moving it, it gets a little weird. But again, these are the compromises, and these are just the realities of, we're talking about two things here. We're talking about mixing in 5.1, and we're talking about delivering stems that will be submixed into 5.1, and we're talking about immersive. But
the point is we're talking about, we're getting into a world where there's going to be more than just two speaker stacks.
Yeah.
So
there is. And this is stuff you got to think about. And at a certain point, you just can't do, like, to get the neato whiz bang tricks of immersive. If you're really sold on that, or if someone's making you do it, you got, at some point, you just kind of got to learn new tricks, or just go, okay, I can't do all my tricks. You know what I mean?
Tell us just a little bit, you were starting to tell us about the Britney Spears thing and what your experience was with that. Yeah. Mm-hmm. Just as far as, where did you end up? Were you doing what we just talked about?
Well, where we ended up was canceled as fuck. Is where we ended up.
Like, no show, not happening. Okay.
Yeah, I was here in LA at another hotel, and they called me and said she canceled, and it took my brain like 0.1 nanoseconds to be like, yeah, that makes sense. I didn't think it was going to happen anyway.
Got it.
But the way that we did that, and there's a situation where immersive would have worked great.
Sure, because you're starting from scratch, right?
We start everything. We started from scratch. Here's the biggest part, though. It was a residency. It didn't have to travel. I would never in a billion years ask any of my clients, as to not get laughed out of a production meeting, to hang 20 hangs of speakers. There's just not enough time in the day. So we started from scratch. It was a residency. And here's the other big part. I can say all this. Everyone knows what that show is. It's a track show.
Yeah, right.
It's the same thing every night, and it's got a lot of dance elements and a lot of. It was the MD, and I'm spacing on the guy's name. He too was like, we were all in on it. So he was in. I went to the studio here in LA, and he showed me what he was doing. So he was building the show with all these crazy effects. And the way we were going to do it is those tracks, forget like I've got 8 channels of playback, forget I've got 16 channels of playback. I mean, it was like I had like 64 channels of playback. So what I'm describing is where immersive would work beautifully.
You're describing Cirque du Soleil is what you're describing.
Totally. Inorganic elements, all playback, all. Every last bit, same thing, designed for this. And once he and I got on board together, I started to get really excited about it.
Yeah.
Now taking a rock band and doing this, or like anything else I do, I'd be like, what am I putting where, and what am I losing in that speaker? So it now goes back here to justify having all of this, but that's how we were doing it. That's how we were laying it out. Everybody was great. The manufacturer was very hands-on, of course, because they had a lot riding on it.
Sure.
So in that instance, that's where surround, immersive, whatever, would shine.
Yeah.
And it would have. And I really wish I had done it. The idea was I was going to set it up and I was going to leave and turn it over to somebody else. I really wish I would have done it, because I think it would have been super interesting sonically. I think I would have been proud of it, and I would have that experience to go, okay, here's where I know I believe in immersive.
Yeah.
So it died on the vine. And
I think it's coming down the pipe, guys. The immersive thing is, I think more and more of us are going to be asked to do it. And so prepare yourselves. And one of the ways to prepare yourself is to, learn about 5.1 mixing, and learn about what's happening in those speakers. Like I said, if you have the ability to have a 5.1, even if it's rudimentary, even if it's one of those Sony, whatever.
Yeah.
If you have the ability to actually unplug speakers, learn what's in each of those speakers. And I also am not afraid. I know that a bunch of us live guys, as we get back to work here, we do TV shows all the time. I pick the brains of really good 5.1 mixers about stuff, as we're doing Saturday Night Live, I'll ask Jay, Vicari 100 times, wow, dude, what are you doing right there? Because I want to know about that kind of stuff. So don't be afraid to ask people. They'll always share.
Sure. And you think about it, those guys, they too were led into this world.
Totally.
They
were like, what?
Right.
Okay. But it happened, 15 years ago or whatever.
I heard an interesting, we got a few minutes. I heard an interesting theory on, everyone's pontificating on where immersive falls. And again, for installs, for residencies, permanent installations and stuff, makes a lot of sense. It's way more practical.
Sure.
And yes, some big tours will be, how we get around the logistics, I don't know. Some big tours will attempt it, but it's just going to cost a lot of money and take a lot of time to just put it in. But I heard someone sort of saying, I've heard more than one person say this, that maybe people that are going to do it more are like I don't know what you'd call it, like a B+ tour, or like where it doesn't have 20 trucks of lighting.
Oh, I see.
In other words, to where maybe it's like an audiophile type client,
right?
Who, where it's not the artist doing flips around the arena in her 19th wardrobe change.
Right. It's the tours where audio is king.
Where audio is king, and it has been deployed and shown to the client, and they really like it. And so the time is allotted for. It's also taken away from those other places, and I could see that. I could see it working like that.
Listen, I'm in no way bad talking immersive audio. I think it has its place, and I think that there could be really cool experiences, of you, making an artist work. But I also think that it is not going to be what every artist is going to run to,
It's not.
There will be no Iron Maiden immersive audio.
Right. Yeah. You're not going to be mixing it with those dudes.
Yeah, that's not happening. No. But, like you said, if there's, what do you think? Like one of those bands like Muse maybe, or
right,
where, they're already like super analog audiophile.
Yeah. I think Bon Iver did it, like something like, and I think they did it really well from what I understand.
I'm sure. And so my point is that I think it's going to touch a bunch of us. Like, I don't think that no longer is this like, there's only 2 tours out there in the world that are doing this. I think there's going to be a bunch of them. Mm-hmm. And so you might as well start to learn on multi-source mixing now while you have time at home. Try to figure out how to mix 5.1 so that when you go to immersive, it's an easier transition, I think.
Yeah. Right? Yeah. And as we start to wrap up, to think about if you're not starting a tour or an act from scratch with this approach, this speaks all the more to kind of having your stuff tight to where you can break it apart and it doesn't fall apart.
Yeah, so that's interesting because it does speak to, we keep taunting hey, when you build your session from the beginning, not talking about 5.1, not talking about immersive audio, when you're building your session from the beginning, how you and I both do buses into buses into buses, because we want to be able to hand someone anything. And this is part of that story, right? I could go back now to a Linkin Park file that I haven't looked at in 6 years. Okay. It was the last time that I worked for them. More than that, 7 years. And that file would be able to do immersive audio because everything's already broken out into steps. The bus compression part of that, I'd have to mess around with a little bit.
But you'd be okay.
But the broken out part of it already exists.
Yeah.
So that's what, we keep trying to bang into your guys' heads, that it's those kind of things you want to leave your ability to access those kind of things by building a file from the start.
Yes.
That does that kind of stuff.
Yep.
So, cool.
God, all this just makes my head hurt.
It does. Well, I mean, honestly, and that is the whole point. This is the end of this discussion, but the whole point of this is that it is a completely different thought process than left and right mixing. It really is. Like, you have to, we speak for the last 43 episodes or 44 episodes, we've spoke about how summing is important. You have to make sure that, everything compression into compression and, all that stuff in order to get the final finished left and right product. Throw all that shit out the window now.
Right.
When you're doing immersive or 5.1 mixing, it's a really different thought process. And I'm telling you guys, it's coming down the pipe. And so get ahead of it, learn what's happening and get ahead of it.
Yeah. I'm sure in due time, we will have a far more advanced bit of conversation just based on experience.
Right. From experience, right? Where we will say, "Oh, what'd you do, Chris, this last couple of months? Oh, you've been mixing in immersive audio. Let's talk about that." Yeah, right. Because again, I don't have a whole lot of experience in immersive audio. I've mixed in a bunch of immersive audio situations that were demos and blah blah blah.
Yes,
but I've never taken it on tour, so I can't speak to that yet. But I know that it's coming. It's going to come to me. And I am, it's one of those things that I'm looking at and being like, ooh, I better be kind of ready to figure that out.
Yeah, totally.
Along with this was, 15 years ago when, I was looking at stuff and going, I better be able to figure out what's happening here with digital audio.
Exactly.
It's coming.
Exactly.
And that's the same thing. I have that same feeling about immersive. Like, oh, it's coming. I better figure this out,
Yeah.
And you should too. So,
yeah. I'll say this before we go. I've spoken to quite a few people here lately that are far more advanced in years than I am and still active, that are enthusiastically embraced all of this technology. Yes. And it's really because they know that if anything, they're at the forefront of a lot of it. Because first of all, they still have natural curiosity and they're interested in their craft, but also it's like, I don't want to become obsolete. No. I mean, I need to know this stuff. Even if I'm not the biggest proponent of it, we all need to know it. Yeah, so, that's exactly right. I think that's the point I was trying to make. And thanks. Yeah, and you totally did. I was just thinking about some of the guys I've spoken to here lately are, upwards of 65, 70 years old. They're at the forefront of this. You know what I mean? No, it's like they're jamming on it. Like they're blowing me out of the water with where they are with it. And I'm like, man, right on. It's really cool. So yeah, and I don't know that it'll be something that'll come right out of the chute when we go back to work here, just because it's a lot more money and it's a lot more people. And those are all things that are going to become factors with the COVID thing at first. But that's why I'm telling you to get in front of it now, because a year from now or, a year after we start going back, I think it's going to become a thing. There's lots of speaker manufacturers. I went to the NAMM show in 2019 and L Acoustics, D&B, Meyer's been doing it for like 30 years, by the way. They have been doing, immersive audio for like Cirque du Soleil for, decades. Mm-hmm. And like I went to an RCF immersive audio demo. So it's coming. There are every speaker manufacturer says, check it out. We have immersive. And so get ahead of it and we'll see it in a couple of years, I think. It's true. Cool. It's true. Thanks for tuning in, guys. Episode 45. Like, subscribe, tell your friends, please. Have them check it out. We think we have a really great thing going on here, and we hope you do too. And if you do, we'd love to have all your buddies check it out too. All right. Thanks for tuning in. Take care. We'll see you on the next one. See you, everybody.